The International Court of Justice, a nuanced analysis of jurisdiction, enforcement, and its role in global adjudication. Executive Summary. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, serves as the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, a role distinct from having universal jurisdiction over all nations. The court's authority in settling legal disputes between states is fundamentally based on the explicit consent of the parties involved. Its mandate is twofold: to adjudicate contentious cases submitted by states and to provide advisory opinions on legal questions referred by authorized UN bodies. While the judgments in contentious cases are legally binding on the parties, the court lacks a direct enforcement mechanism, relying instead on the UN Security Council, a process subject to the veto power of its permanent members. This report examines the ICJ's foundational principles and operational limitations, using the historical case of the Temple of Preah Vihear between Thailand and Cambodia as a primary example. This analysis reveals that the ICJ functions as a crucial instrument for resolving specific legal conflicts and upholding international law, but its effectiveness is intertwined with the political will of states to both consent to its jurisdiction and comply with its final decisions. The report concludes that despite these structural challenges, the court plays a vital and increasingly relevant role in a shifting geopolitical landscape, particularly in addressing issues of community interest that transcend traditional bilateral disputes. Chapter 1. The International Court of Justice in the Global Legal Order. 1.1. Establishment and Foundational Mandate. The International Court of Justice is often referred to as the World Court. It is the primary judicial organ of the United Nations. It was formally established in June 1945 by the UN Charter and commenced its operations in April 1946. Located at the Peace Palace in The Hague, Netherlands, the court succeeded the Permanent Court of International Justice. Its foundational purpose is to peacefully resolve and settle international disputes in conformity with the principles of justice and international law. The UN Charter itself serves as the constitutive text for the ICJ, and its statute forms an integral part of the Charter, providing the legal framework for the court's composition and functioning. As a guardian of the global legal system, the court's role is to ensure that legal principles are applied to disputes that might otherwise lead to a breach of peace. 1.2. Composition and administrative structure. The court is composed of 15 independent judges who are elected for 9-year terms by the UN General Assembly and the Security Council. To ensure impartiality and legal expertise, the judges are chosen from among individuals of high moral character and recognized legal competence, irrespective of their nationality. A core rule of its composition is that no two judges may be nationals of the same state. The court's operations are supported by a registry, which serves as its administrative arm. The official languages of the court are English and French. For the sake of efficiency, the court is authorized to form chambers composed of 3 or more judges to address specific categories of cases or to handle a particular case with the consent of the parties. This flexibility allows the court to adapt its structure to the specific needs of a dispute, ensuring a speedy dispatch of business.
1.3. The ICJ's dual function: contentious cases and advisory opinions. The ICJ's jurisdiction is defined by 2 primary functions: settling legal disputes between states and providing advisory opinions on legal questions. These 2 functions, while both rooted in the application of international law, operate under distinct rules and have different legal consequences. The court's very first contentious case, Corfu Channel, United Kingdom v. Albania, filed on May 22, 1947, demonstrated its role in adjudicating state-to-state disputes. In contrast, advisory opinions are not intended to settle a dispute directly, but rather to offer legal guidance to the requesting UN organ or specialized agency. The fundamental differences between these 2 functions are summarized in the table below. Feature: contentious cases. Parties: only states can be parties. Advisory opinions: authorized UN organs and specialized agencies. Purpose: to settle specific legal disputes between states. Advisory opinions: to provide legal clarification on a question. Jurisdiction: the court's jurisdiction is strictly based on the consent of the states involved. Advisory opinions: the General Assembly and Security Council can request opinions on any legal questions. Proceedings. Instituted by either a special agreement, for example, Indonesia v. Malaysia, or a unilateral application, for example, Cameroon v. Nigeria. Advisory opinions. The court gathers facts and holds proceedings, but participating states are not considered parties. Legal force. Final and binding on the parties to the case. No appeal is possible. Advisory opinions. Not legally binding, but carry considerable authoritative weight.
Chapter 2. The Principle of Consent. Correcting Misconceptions of Universal Jurisdiction. 2.1. The Consensual Basis of Jurisdiction. A common misconception is that the International Court of Justice holds universal jurisdiction, allowing it to intervene in disputes between any nations at will. This is inaccurate. The court's authority is not inherent, but is a function of the explicit consent of the states involved. This principle is a cornerstone of international law and is deeply rooted in the concept of state sovereignty. Without a state's consent, the court has no power to hear a case or deliver a binding judgment against it. This limitation is a crucial factor in understanding the ICJ's role and its impact on the international stage. 2.2. Mechanisms of state consent. The four foundations of jurisdiction. A state can provide its consent to the ICJ's jurisdiction through one of four primary mechanisms. The first is a special agreement, also known as a compromis. This is a bilateral document lodged with the court by states that have a pre-existing dispute and mutually agree to submit it for resolution. This method is highly effective because the parties themselves have demonstrated a willingness to resolve the issue through the court, making them more likely to comply with the final judgment. The second mechanism is a compromissory clause within a binding treaty. Many modern treaties contain a provision whereby in the event of a dispute over the interpretation or application of the treaty, one of the parties may unilaterally refer the dispute to the court. While this provides a legal basis for jurisdiction, it can be less effective than a special agreement, as a state may still refuse to participate in the proceedings or comply with a judgment it did not actively seek. A notable example of this occurred during the Iran hostage crisis, where Iran refused to participate in a case brought by the United States based on such a clause and did not comply with the subsequent judgment. The third foundation for jurisdiction is the Optional Clause Declaration, or Article 36(2) of the statute. This is a voluntary declaration by which a state accepts the compulsory jurisdiction of the court in disputes with any other state that has made a similar declaration. Although sometimes labeled compulsory, this jurisdiction is voluntary in its origin and is often limited by reservations that exclude certain categories of disputes. For instance, among the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, only the United Kingdom currently has an optional clause declaration in force. Finally, the court also holds transferred jurisdiction from the Permanent Court of International Justice, PCIJ. This applies to states that had made declarations or entered into treaties granting jurisdiction to the PCIJ, as these commitments were transferred to the ICJ upon its creation.
2.3. The enforcement paradox, the gap between legal obligation and political reality. A central challenge for the ICJ is the gap between its legal authority and its practical ability to enforce its rulings. While judgments in contentious cases are legally binding on the parties and are final, the court itself possesses no formal enforcement mechanism. The UN Charter provides that if a state fails to comply with the judgment, the other party may bring the matter to the Security Council, which is empowered to recommend or decide upon measures to give effect to the judgment. However, this reliance on the Security Council introduces a significant political dimension. The enforcement process is subject to the veto power of the 5 permanent members: China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, which can prevent any action from being taken. This structural limitation highlights a fundamental tension in international law. A state's legal obligation to comply with a judgment does not always translate into political willingness to do so. The case of Nicaragua v. United States stands as a definitive illustration of this enforcement paradox. In 1984, Nicaragua filed a case against the United States concerning military and paramilitary activities conducted against its government. The United States, after initially participating, withdrew from the proceedings and refused to take part in the case after the court ruled that it had jurisdiction to hear the dispute. The court, in its 1986 judgment, found that the United States had violated customary international law by supporting the Contras and mining Nicaragua's harbors, and it ordered the United States to make reparations for the injuries caused. The United States has never complied with this legally binding judgment, a refusal that continues to this day. The case underscores that while the ICJ can render a legally sound verdict, its authority is ultimately dependent on the political will of states to accept and implement the ruling. The judgment, however, remains a powerful legal record of a state's breach of international law, a benchmark that Nicaragua continues to cite decades later in its call for compliance. Chapter 3. Case Study, The Temple of Preah Vihear, Cambodia versus Thailand. 3.1. Historical background of the dispute. The territorial dispute between Cambodia and Thailand over the area surrounding the Temple of Preah Vihear offers a compelling example of the ICJ's role in a long-standing, complex conflict. The roots of the dispute lie in the Franco-Siamese treaties of 1904 and 1907, which established a mixed commission to delimit the border between Siam, now Thailand, and French Indochina, which included Cambodia. A map produced by a team of French officers in 1907, known as the Annex I map, showed the frontier line placing the temple on the Cambodian side of the border, despite the fact that the watershed line of the Dong Grek Mountains would have put it on Siamese territory. After the departure of French colonial forces in 1953, Thai troops moved into the temple site, prompting a formal protest and a lawsuit from Cambodia to the ICJ in 1959. The 1962 judgment, a landmark legal win for Cambodia. In the proceedings, Thailand argued that the Annex I map was not legally binding, as it was never officially approved by the Mixed Commission. Thailand also contended that the temple's location on a cliff, which made it more accessible from the Thai side, was evidence of its de facto control and ownership. In a 9-3 decision delivered on June 15, 1962, the court found in favor of Cambodia. The court's judgment was based on a crucial legal principle. Although the map was not a product of the Joint Commission, Thailand had accepted it for nearly half a century, without protest. This long-term conduct was considered a tacit acceptance, or acquiescence, which gave the map and its demarcation line a binding character. The court ruled that the Temple of Preah Vihear was situated in territory under Cambodian sovereignty, and ordered Thailand to withdraw any military and police forces from the temple and its vicinity, and to restore any objects removed since 1954. The ruling provided a legal resolution to the dispute, but did not address the broader historical and cultural issues, a narrow focus that may have prevented a wider diplomatic confrontation at the time.
3.3. The renewed conflict and the 2013 interpretation. The dispute re-emerged decades later in 2008 when Cambodia's application to list the temple as a UNESCO World Heritage Site provoked intense protests and military clashes in Thailand. This renewed conflict led Cambodia to request a formal interpretation of the 1962 judgment from the ICJ under Article 60 of the statute. Cambodia contended that while Thailand recognized its sovereignty over the temple itself, it did not accept Cambodia's sovereignty over the immediate vicinity, a term that the original judgment had not precisely defined. Responding to the renewed violence, the court issued an order for provisional measures in July 2011, requiring both parties to withdraw their military personnel from a provisional demilitarized zone around the temple, pending a final judgment on the interpretation. This order was a powerful assertion of the court's authority to act as a force for de-escalation while a legal process is underway. 3.4. The 2013 judgment and its aftermath. The court delivered its judgment on November 11, 2013, concluding that a dispute did exist between the parties regarding the meaning and scope of the 1962 ruling. Unanimously, the court declared that the 1962 judgment had decided that Cambodia had sovereignty over the whole territory of the promontory of Prey of Har, and that Thailand was obligated to withdraw its forces from that entire area. The ruling further clarified that the phrase vicinity on Cambodian territory in the original judgment should be interpreted as extending to the entire promontory. Despite the clear legal declaration, the aftermath demonstrated the challenges of implementation. Commentators viewed the judgment as a nuanced outcome, with neither side fully achieving their goals, as the court did not attempt to define a precise boundary beyond the promontory, leaving that to the two parties to determine jointly. The domestic political climate in Thailand, marked by nationalist sentiment, made compliance with the ruling politically difficult, with some officials publicly denying acceptance of the decision. The issue remains politically charged, and while there has been some progress on tourism cooperation, the joint border demarcation process has moved slowly. The dispute serves as a powerful reminder that while the ICJ can provide definitive legal clarity, the ultimate success of its judgments depends on the political will of the states involved to implement them in good faith.
The long and complex history of the case is summarized in the following timeline. 1904, France for Cambodia and Siam for Thailand sign a treaty to delimit their shared border. 1907, a map is produced by French officers, the Annex I map, that places the temple of Preah Vihar on the Cambodian side of the border. 1954, Thai troops occupy the temple after the departure of French forces. 1959, Cambodia files a lawsuit against Thailand with the ICJ. 1962, ICJ delivers its judgment, ruling 9-3 that the temple is in Cambodian territory and ordering Thailand to withdraw its troops and restore objects. 2008, the dispute resurfaces following Cambodia's successful application to list the temple as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. 2011, Cambodia files a request for interpretation of the 1962 judgment. The ICJ issues provisional measures, creating a demilitarized zone. 2013, ICJ rules that the 1962 judgment granted Cambodia sovereignty over the entire promontory of Preah Vihar and orders Thailand to withdraw its forces from that area. Chapter 4. The ICJ's Enduring Relevance and Contemporary Challenges. 4.1. The ICJ and a Shifting Geopolitical Landscape. In a world of increasing global tensions, the International Court of Justice has shown a remarkable evolution in its caseload. There has been a marked increase in recourse to the ICJ, particularly in cases involving community interest, where states bring claims based on obligations owed to the international community as a whole, or erga omnes. This represents a significant move beyond the traditional model of bilateral disputes, as states that are not directly affected by a breach are increasingly willing to step forward to uphold fundamental international norms. The ongoing cases of the Gambia v. Myanmar and South Africa v. Israel, both brought under the Genocide Convention, are emblematic of this shift. These proceedings demonstrate a growing reliance on the court to address what are considered shared, universal values and signal a new era for international law. The court in such instances acts as a crucial instrument for pursuing accountability and preserving the global legal order. 4.2. The role of advisory opinions. The court's advisory opinions, while not formally binding, are not without significant weight. As judicial statements, they identify and ascertain existing and binding international legal rights and obligations and carry considerable authoritative weight. They can have a notable impact on international relations, even if they lack operative clauses requiring compliance. The court's opinions on matters such as the legality of the Israeli occupation over Palestine or the legal consequences of the construction of a wall in the occupied Palestinian territory provide a clear legal determination of a situation that can influence the actions of states and other international actors. Thus, even without the binding force of a judgment, an advisory opinion serves as a crucial legal barometer for the international community. 4.3. The future of international adjudication. The primary challenge facing the ICJ remains its lack of direct enforcement power. This reliance on the political will of states for compliance can lead to inconsistencies, as some nations may ignore or outright defy judgments that do not align with their national interests. This structural limitation is compounded by the fact that the court cannot compel states to end conflicts or establish peace agreements, as these require diplomatic engagement that lies beyond the court's judicial mandate. Despite these limitations, the ICJ remains an indispensable pillar of the international system. The court's judgments serve as a legal benchmark against which a state's conduct can be measured, even in cases of noncompliance. Proposed reforms to strengthen its effectiveness include creating a collaborative enforcement mechanism within the UN that could, for instance, involve sanctions for states that consistently disregard ICJ rulings. Furthermore, enhancing the court's collaboration with other UN bodies and improving its public outreach could help it address the multifaceted nature of modern conflicts and counter misinformation about its authority. The continued willingness of states to bring contentious cases to The Hague and the increasing trend of cases brought on behalf of the international community demonstrate that despite its structural limitations, the ICJ's judicial function is more vital than ever in providing a legal framework for a peaceful global order.